morning, everyone. Welcome to 21st Century Philippines and World Literatures. We are now at our 7th week. For this week's topic, our topic is Our People's Story, a re- a rereading of Philippine literature. And for this week, we will define what Philippine literature is according to their own understanding, and also we will list the important information on the Philippine literature's timeline and also determine the importance and the changes that Philippine literature has gone through the years. So let's proceed to our discussion. So we have here Our People's Story. It is a reading of Philippine literature. And so basically, what is Philippine literature? For this one, it is a product, a reflection of and reaction to the period, place, and people who produced it. Also, Philippine literature is the body of works, both oral and written, that Filipinos, whether native, naturalized, or foreign-born, have created about the experience of people living in or relating to Philippine society. It is composed or written in one of the Philippine languages, in Spanish, in English, and in Chinese as well. Also, it may be produced in the capital city of Manila and in different urban centers and rural outputs, even in foreign lands where descendants of Filipino migrants use English or any language of the Philippines to create works that tell their lives and aspirations. Also, Philippine literature is a collection of texts, both oral or written, whether published as books, serialized in periodicals, recorded in tapes, mimeographed in loose sheets, etched on bamboo, chanted at home or recited around a fire, which are created by Filipinos of all ages and stock of different languages, both local and foreign. So this will include the PhilAms and OFW's writings, all and literatures around the globe. And informs indigenous were borrowed as adopted, which portray the experiences of Filipinos. So basically, Philippine literature is a collection of texts. It may be produced uh, anywhere in Manila or anywhere in abroad, and it is basically a collection of the body of works. It may be oral or written um, by a Filipino native or a naturalized Filipino citizen or foreign-born Filipino, foreign-born citizen, but became a naturalized Filipino. And it is basically relating to Philippine society. So these are some of the reasons why do we have to study Philippine literature. So we are studying Philippine literature to appreciate our literary heritage. Also, for us to realize our literary limitations conditioned by certain historical factors, so we can take steps to overcome them, and as well as to understand that we have a great and noble tradition which can serve as means to assimilate other cultures, and also to show that as Filipinos who truly love and take pride in our own culture, we have to manifest our deep concern for our own literature, and this we can do by studying the literatures of our country. So now that we have stated why do we have to study Philippine literature, we will now take a look and or list the important information on the Philippine literature's timeline. And basically, for the timeline in Philippine literatures, we will focus on some of the highlights, and also according to uh, Kahayan described the following features of Philippine literatures, but it was written in English. So let's take a look at it. So during the time for the timeline in Philippine literature, Philippine literatures in English is phenomenological since the inception of English in our culture. Also, Philippine literatures is about 400 years old. So that's a very old sum of a year for the Philippine literature, and timelines may not be necessary to the study of literature, but since literature and history are inescapable related, it has become facilitative to map up system which will aid us in delineating certain time boundaries. And in addition, also Philippine literature is as old as its country's history. So basically, if we study the Philippine literature, we will know the country's history as well. And since some of our Philippine literatures are written in English, it is well accepted because English has been part of our own culture, and also we for this one um, there are some literary works also that were conditioned by certain historical factors. So let's take a look of some of the highlights in the timelines in Philippine literature. So the following is the timeline in the Philippine literature. So we have here during the pre-colonial period. So it would start until the period in the Philippines up to year 1564. So during the pre-colonial period, we have here, it is the longest period in the Philippine literatures, and also the literary outputs of this period cannot be called substantial because much of it was oral. So we have also Spanish regime and nationalistic and the United States colonial rule. As what we have discussed, the pre-colonial period is the longest period in the Philippine literatures. Also, the literary outputs of this period cannot be called substantial because much of it was oral. And also for the pre-colonial period, we have riddles, and riddles gives an enigma or puzzle. And also, we have proverbs or wise saying or salawikain as well. Also, during the pre-colonial period, songs were also very much part of the pre-colonial literature and the people's daily life. And mimetic dances often accompanied these songs and rituals and were the precursor of the drama form. In prose pre-colonial literature, we have myths, tales, fables, legends, and fantastic stories. And also, during the pre-colonial period, the most significant and longest form of pre-colonial poetry was the folk epic. Basically, the narratives of sustained land based on oral tradition revolving around supernatural events or heroic deeds in the form of verse, which is either chanted or sung with a certain seriousness of purpose, embodying or validating the beliefs, customs, ideals, or life or lives of the people. And some of the popular epics that we have is, of course, Biag ni Lamang from the Ilocos region. We also have Hinilawut from Panay Island, and Bantukan and Inda Rapatra at Sulaiman from Maguindanao. So during the pre-colonial period, stories, fables, legends, myths, tales are very famous or have been established during the pre-colonial period. Now, let's discuss the Spanish regime. And it was from the year 1565 up to 1863. And the literary scene during this era was focused on religious themes due to the Christianization of the Philippines by the Spaniards. So we have here, we took on a religious character. So basically the Christianization of the Philippines, introduced the first printing press, and Doctrina Christiana was the first published book. It was published in the year 1593. Also, during the Spanish period, we have some literary output such as catechisms, confession manuals, grammar books, and dictionaries. Moreover, during the Spanish period, there were also poems in Spanish and Tagalog, and they were written by Latinos who were well versed in both languages. So, Passion was one of the most popular form of religious literature, and it is a long time narrative poem about the passion and death of Christ. And we could see that until now we are still doing the Passion during the Lenten season or the Mahal na Araw. So our some of our elders are still doing the Passion, and they are still singing the Passion of Christ. So also, ang Mahal na Pasyon ni Jesucristong Panginoon natin by Gaspar Aquilino de Belen is well-known passion. We also have Cenaculo during Mahal na Araw. So, Cenaculo is a dramatization of the Passion. It is held in some provinces as well. There is a play on the Passion and Death of Christ as well. And during the Spanish period, we have two popular narrative poems. We have Florante at Laura and the Corrido. And some other literary types is Duplo and Karagatan, and Komedia is the most popular drama form. We also have established process and pagsusulatan ng dalawang binibini na si Urbana at Felisa by Marcelo de Castro. So basically, during the Spanish period, many Latinos already written a lot of poems because they were well versed in both languages, Filipino and Spanish, I mean Tagalog and Spanish. And during this time, a lot of literary forms regarding about Christianism, regarding about Jesus Christ, regarding about religious views, acts, practices were also practiced and established, and a lot of written forms towards Spanish were also um, published during this time because we had the first printing press during Spanish period. Now let's go to the nationalistic period, and nationalistic period was the period between 1864 to 1896, and this was the last of the 19th century, and this started when we fought through the Spaniards. And basically, if the religion was the thematic focus during the Spanish era, a strong feeling of nationalism was the main agenda of this literary period. And the period is divided into propaganda and the revolution, basically from Rizal, Luciano Lopez Jaena, and Gregorio del Pilar. Also, at the close of the 19th century, the revolutionists took over there, and was a shift not only in language, so basically there was a shift from Spanish to Tagalog, but in the audience or readers from the intelligentsia to the masses. Also, Bonifacio, Jacinto, and Mavini were the prominent revolutionary writers. So, Andres Bonifacio, Emilio Jacinto, and Apolinario Mabini. And during this period, it was truly significant because it produced a literature that was realistic and truly Filipino. So basically, during the national period, there was a freedom of producing of literature, and there was this himagsikan all throughout. And the next timeline is from 1910 to 1930, or 1920 to 1945. And basically, it was the United States colonial rule. So for this one, the literature in the Philippines flourish in three languages. So now we have the Spanish, English, and Filipino. And may it be in reading, writing, and speaking as well. And during this colonial rule, it was divided into two periods. We have the period of apprenticeship. So it was during 1910 to 1935. And we have the period of emergence. It was the year of 1935 to 1945. And it was the time of self-discovery and rapid of growth before the war and Japanese occupation as well. So we have again the pre-colonial period, Spanish regime, nationalistic period, the United States colonial. The next that we have is the Japanese occupation. And for the Japanese occupation, it was during 1942 to 1944, and it was the war years. And basically, um, this literary period broke away from tradition, especially among Tagalog poets, because instead of writing in the Balagtas tradition, may it be rhetorical, verbose, or figurative, poets wrote in simple language and free verse only. And during this year years, there was a bountiful harvest in poetry, fiction, and in the fields of drama and essay. And for this period, poets wrote in simple language and free verse. Some examples that we have is the portrait, Filipino life and culture, basically some short story and flowering of Tagalog short poetry, and Palangka Awards or National Awards was launched during this year. Next year that we have for the period is the contemporary period, and it was during 1960 to 1986. And for this year, it upfills in nation's history. It was the first quarter storm of the 70s, and is where the martial law years and the merging of the three traditions, basically oral lore, ethnic tradition, Spanish tradition, American colonial tradition. So these were the three traditions that have merged during the contemporary period, and also during this period, literary expressions give responses to the historical and political force that have shaped Philippine society since the Pacific War as well. And the last timeline for Philippine literature is the post-EDSA literature, and it was 1986 up to um, maybe it's a year 90s. So during this period, we have Lumbera and Lumbera. They have explained that the character of the Philippine literary scene after EDSA may be pinpointed by referring to the theories that inform literary production to the products issuing from the publishers, to the dominant concerns demonstrated by the writer's output, and to the direction towards which literary studies are tending. Also, there is in the academe an emerging critical orientation that draws its concerns and insights from literary theorizing current in England and the United States. So, um, from post-EDSA publishing has been marked by adventurousness and a willingness to gamble on non-traditional projects, and the fourth and final characteristics of post-EDSA writing is the developing trust towards the retrieval and the recuperation of the Philippine writing in Philippine languages other than Tagalog. And today, Philippine literature thus be classified into the following. So we have the residual, the dominant language, the emergent. So for the residual, is a good part of which is oral and regional, but remaining in the margins simply because the center of writing and publishing is in Metro Manila. For the dominant language, it is largely in English and Tagalog-based Filipino. And the emergent, it is produced by those in the periphery and the marginal sectors, including workers, peasants, urban poor, women, gays, lesbians, and ethnic groups. Sometimes residual oral literature such as Composo in Negros, Saludamay in Cordillera, Ismailing in Samar, and Baliling in Mindanao are thus emergent. And let's say that today it is quite common to have Filipino writers publish abroad in the original English translation if written in the local language. So once again, the timeline in Philippine literature, we have the pre-colonial period, the Spanish period, nationalistic period, United States colonial rule, the Japanese occupation, the contemporary period, and the post-EDSA literature. So for this week's lessons, we have references, we have Literatura, 21st Century Philippine and World Literatures, written by Jaime Ang from Mindshapers, Co-Inc. from Recollectos Street, Manila. We also have 21st Century Literature from the Philippines and World, first edition, written by Marikit Tara Huichoco from Rex Bookstore, M. Recto Avenue, Manila. And we have some links. Actually, we have 3 video links that I may be able to share to the group for you to know more about the history and the timeline in the Philippine literatures. So for your activity, you will write a reaction paper and basically watch the following videos, then write a 1 paragraph reaction for only one video for a total of 5 paragraphs. So for me, I will just require you to choose one video. So we have here Spanish era, United States colonial, we have the US rule, we have the earlier years of contemporary period, we have contemporary period, and also nationalistic period. So I will just require you to choose one, and then after choosing, you may start writing your paragraph and submit it to me. So again, for this activity, only choose one of the video links and write a paragraph regarding about it, or write your reaction regarding about it, and submit to me once you are done. So once again, if you have any questions regarding this week's lessons, don't hesitate to ask me. You may reach me personally through Facebook Messenger, or you may directly ask me at school. If you have any questions and concerns, don't hesitate to ask me. So again, for this activity, choose one from the video link and write a reaction regarding about it. So thank you once again for this week's lessons. For this week lesson, we have basically defined what Philippine literature is. Also, we had listed the important information uh, on the Philippine literature timeline, and also determine the importance and the changes that Philippine literature has gone through the years. So before ending this lesson, I would like to say thank you and share a Bible verse from the book of Mark, chapter 9, verse 23. We have here, said Jesus, everything is possible for one who believes. So thank you once again, everyone, and God bless.